the economy is growing, Ndu, like you were telling us. So projected to grow by 6%.
6.1, please.
6.1% this year.
Who is saying this?
Who's saying?
Okay, let me tell you.
You look for it. Page 19 of the Standard.
It's right here.
Guy.
Why are you sad? It's a good thing. Economy can grow.
What is a good thing? That it has been stated? Or that we are hoping
now imagine if it has been stated and then it actually grows. Double whammy, man. See, these
when
are good
you're
things.
told about economic growth in this country, you have to ask, what are the indicators? How do we know the economy is growing? Beyond it being stated that it is growing.
Actually, kwambia indicators in the ile. Sindio? Page 19 nakujanga after what number? 18.
After the buzz.
Sindio?
Today, pulse.
State projects economy to grow by 6.1%. There is robust activity in the service sector and also in the wholesale and retail trade. So these are the indicators, CT, that you're talking about. What would fuel or inform this statement? What fuels or informs that is that there is robust activity in the wholesale and retail trade. It also then remains to be seen whether KRA will hit the target of this current financial year. But that notwithstanding, the government has projected the economy will grow at a rate of 6% in the first quarter of 20-something, the number I cannot see, 2023, okay? First quarter, sasa inaisha. And it is expected to maintain the momentum over the medium term. Now, again, some of the leading indicators show a strong performance of the economy in the first quarter of 2023, reflecting robust activity in the service sector and also in the wholesale and retail trade, accommodation and food services, education and information and communication. The World Bank recently forecast that Kenya's economy will expand at 5.2% and 5.3% in 2024 and 2023 respectively. 2025 respectively. Revenue collection is projected at 2.893 billion shillings, at 78% of the GDP in the financial year 2023-2024, an increase from the financial year 2022-2023, which stands at 2.5 billion, and expected to rise further to 4.1 billion by the year 2026-2027. So this is where all these projections are coming from. It is expected that expenditure will be at 3.5 billion in 2023-2024, and it will include recurrent expenditure, which comprises 15.2% of the GDP. So they're looking at all these things vis-a-vis spending, vis-a-vis what the projections are until 2027, and they've said, look, we're on an upward trajectory here, and things are going to look better in the medium term.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a good thing.
That is a possibility.
Look, all the indicators. It's like you're looking at the sky, right?
Yeah.
And you see this overcast.
And this is by a third party.
Wait now. You see it's overcast. It's a bit dark. And the clouds, those are called cumulus clouds. Now, they're not white and puffy. They are dark. What's indicators that it's going to what?
Yeah.
It's going to rain. And then the winds are blowing. And then there's a little bit of moisture in the air. The indicators are there will be some downpour at some point. It's going to rain.
Can only get better.
So now they're saying, with all of these things that we're seeing, retail market, people are in the service industry is booming, food, communication, etc., etc. It can only mean, and then when you take all these numbers and you put them against each other, it can only mean that the economy will grow.
So was the writer of that article trying to give us a lesson in economics?
Not the writer of the article.
Government.
The World Bank.
People are telling you, based on this is what we expect.
No.
The cabinet met yesterday and bullishly also went with the same words of the World Bank. Kenya's economy is expected to grow by 6.1% in 2023 and maintain that momentum of the medium term. Leading indicators are what Ndu has just read for us. Those ones include wholesale and retail, the service sector, accommodation and food services, education, and information and communication. The growth outlook will be supported by a broad-based sector growth, including continued strong performance of the service sector, recoveries in agriculture, public sector consolidation. From the expenditure perspectives, private consumption is expected to support aggregate demand, supported by the ongoing labor market, recovery, improved consumer confidence, and resilient remittances.
That's theory. It's all theory. It's absolute theory.
So
whether it's World Bank, whether it's world, you give it any term, world, whatever you want to call it.
What practical thing do you have to counter this?
It's very simple.
Yes.
Are we growing our productivity? It's not complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Where productivity means you have a situation in the country where all the indicators, I'm using the word indicator here, okay? Whether it is our industry, whether it's our commercial sector, whether it's the agricultural sector, okay? All these units of production are functioning. Those who have labor to offer in the economy can find a place where that labor can be rewarded. And if the numbers are growing, then it means that not only is productivity growing, people then have the means to actually utilize what is being produced, meaning they can buy. Okay? And if this goes on over a long period of time and there is that increase in productivity, then you are certain that the economy can grow. So, what makes the economy grow? All these monies, we had an economist telling us this. When we say we borrow money for development, that's what it's supposed to spur. That increase in productivity, which leads to what we're calling growth, meaning the money comes in, we are building roads. While we're building roads, industries that deal with materials have more things to sell, people, and it goes on and on and on. Now, where in the economy are we saying that we are seeing this happen so that this growth that we're talking about can actually be witnessed? Where?
Robust activity in the service sector.
Where?
And also in the wholesale and retail trades. Accommodation and food services. Education and ICT. Are you saying you have not seen the development of new hotels and new accommodation places in the country city?
No. What I have seen...
Have you seen new hotels and accommodation places opening?
In the last few years, yes. In the... a couple of years ago? Yes, I have. But what I've also heard is the hue and cry of there isn't enough business, people trying to sell their businesses. The other day we were reading about a food chain called Java. And the issue is the owners want to sell.
But there's nobody to buy.
Precisely.
Because of their own business.
Yes, because people aren't eating. And unless people eat or drink, there is no money. And the person who wants to buy is seeing, people are not, the uptake of this business is not good. So what am I buying it for?
People are eating city. The chain has not shut down.
No, it hasn't.
The chain is a going concern.
I am not saying it is not.
The sellers are looking for a certain amount.
Yes, you know what that certain amount means?
The buyers are not willing to part with that certain amount.
Eric, the only reason why buyers are willing to part with a certain amount is when they can see a return on their investment.
Yeah.
If they're not seeing it, it doesn't mean it is going down. It just means it is not making as much money as it could.
It also could mean that you're asking for money that is way beyond how much you're making.
Yes, there's that possibility.
So that I could look at it and say, yes, you're making money, but you're making 100. So sell this thing to me at 105. Now, if you come and ask for 200, unanizia any goodwill.
Okay. Let's talk generically, because I really don't know the financial details of that particular
transaction.
All right?
Yes.
Okay. Generically speaking, anything that is considered valuable and is making money, there'll be people competing to buy it. Simply because they can see where it is going. For the longest time, the one investment that Kenyans have always believed in is land. That's before all the conmen, all the charlatans came into this particular industry and would be selling you a pie in the sky, literally, whereas you thought you were actually being sold land. That when you received the piece of paper called a title deed, you find there are 10 of you on that same plot. Before that happened, it was a good investment. You know why? We're a country where the population is continuously increasing. So the pressure on land will continue increasing. So the value, serious, simple, supply, demand. Now, are we seeing the sector in this country which represents the largest number of people, what we call the hidden economy according to this same World Bank, what we call the informal sector as we call it, do we see an increase in people joining it? The answer is yes. But do we see the role that they're playing in terms of building the economy, because they are producers? There is productivity. What increases productivity is if the demand increases. Do you see an increased demand in their services? I use Ubers every single day. Every single day. I mean, Uber here is generic for a cab every single day. And the story I'm being told, an example I was told in the last few days by people who have brought me or taken me from work, said, you know, this thing of people not being paid a salary is affecting us. So I asked, what do you mean? Said, I normally park my vehicle at this place, place A. And I am guaranteed that by around midday when I start work at 7, I have collected, say, 3,000 shillings. That's what I've earned. I said, why? He said, because people want to travel. He said, we have to associate this non-payment of salaries to this because now I have picked you up at 2 o'clock. I have barely made 1,500 shillings. And I'm having to look for work where I normally do not look for work. Okay? And I said, but does it happen one day? He said, no, it has happened now for the last 2 weeks. And it is new. I said, really? So you're assuming when people are paid? He said, I do this business, I've been at it for 4 years. This is what someone told me. I get to understand patterns. All I'm saying is, they are simple indicators of growth. And it isn't words being uttered by the World Bank. Within the country, do we see people spending money or people willing to spend? Willingness may be there, but is there enough
ability
money? Yes, precisely. Precisely.
They may be willing.
They may even want to.
But they're not able.
But they're not able to.
Now, based on that, because of, that preamble, we, the government of Kenya, have therefore said, okay, the cabinet said, revenue collection for the next financial year is projected to be at 2.89 trillion shillings. All right? 2.89
Trillion shillings.
Trillion shillings for the next financial year. That begins in July and ends on June 30th next year. That will be a 17.8% of GDP, an increase from the current financial year, which stands at 2.5 billion shillings, and is expected to grow further to 4.19 billion shillings by 2027. Are we together?
Yep.
So basically, the government is saying how much we hope to need next year. It's going to be a lot more. We're going to raise a lot of money in terms of revenue. For that reason, we can now then say that the budget for the next financial year is going to be 3.6 trillion shillings, which is only 22% of our GDP. Recurrent expenditure is going to be 2.5 trillion shillings, and development is going to be 689 billion shillings. 2.5 trillion on recurrent expenditure, which includes like what Jimmy Wanjigi was telling us yesterday, all those things, salaries and allowances, operations and maintenance, pay debts. What are the other things that we're doing? Send money to counties.
Yeah, OPEX, fueling vehicles.
Those two small two things, okay? All that is just going to be 2.5 trillion shillings, while development money is going to be 689 billion shillings.
Isn't something a bit off there?
Now, we expect to raise 2.8 trillion shillings. We expect to spend 2.5 trillion shillings on recurrent. That leaves us about 300 billion. We also have a 600 billion shillings budget for development. So the amount that is expected then to be borrowed in terms of the deficit is only going to be 663 billion shillings that will be borrowed to finance this budget. And that is not much, because the government is saying, in fact, this is going to be far less than the current financial year. This one, we had inherited the hardshake, blah, 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 blah. Hardshake, the debt for this financial year is 1.12 trillion shillings.
And?
The deficit that has been bridged by debt. Remember, this 1.12 trillion shillings is not what was in the budget. The budget deficit in the last financial year was 800 billion shillings.
Yes.
But because of the way things are looking, they are going to have to borrow 1.12 trillion shillings to cover the budget deficit.
Yes.
Okay? These guys are saying our deficit is only 600 billion shillings. I mean, it's 5 and less than this 1.12. I mean, it's half of it. The expectation then is, if they don't meet any of their targets in terms of they will borrow much more.
Why don't I just play the prophet and state categorically that they will not meet the target and we will borrow more?
This is the start thing, and these are the indicators. Even when we were listening to Jimmy Wanjege yesterday, when we were listening to The Economist on Wednesday, these are the things that we hear. When you listen then to members of parliament, you ask them a question, and they're like, no. We are politicians.
As though we don't know.
It gets to a point where you ask yourself, what on earth is...
You know, the thing that this government, in my mind, is right about, but the way it is presented, it comes out in my mind as though they are whining, and yet what they're saying, what they're trying to say is actually true. You see, this government isn't a stand-alone government. And the processes and activities of governments are a continuum. There are very many things you genuinely inherit. They, like the debt, you will inherit a debt.
It's almost expected.
You will inherit a debt.
Yeah.
If things were a certain way, whether they were good, whether they were helpful, you will inherit them. It's a simple reality. Now, what we then have to look at is, given what you inherited, what have you done? If you inherited a bad situation, has it become worse? Not have you made it worse, has it become worse? And if it has, what is it that has made it become worse?
Or what have you done to make it better?
Yeah. No blame is being apportioned here.
Yeah.
So what is going on? Now, it is clear, without a shadow of a doubt, that we have a ton of problems. And this tonnage is not decreasing from everything we hear. Okay? So when somebody comes up and tells us that they have these rosy projections, we've been hearing those rosy projections for such a long time, and then the reality comes and slaps you back into its orbit and tells you, excuse me, wake up.
I'm here.
Yes, I've heard what was said, but reality, I'm telling you, I'm here, and this is what I represent. So, if the reality is what we see it as, the question that has to be asked is, what next? Now, unfortunately, reality is often tempered by something that we call the optics. Okay? If you have an agency whose main task is to collect money, and we see that the issues around it don't seem to be working as we ought to, or as it ought to.
They're not collecting what they have been.
No, they haven't.
To.
There could be reasons that are beyond the government. There may be things that the government has no control over. But again, that's where I bring in the discussion of the optics. If we had a Commissioner General, are they called Commissioner Generals?
Which ones?
Of what?
The head of KRA.
Yes.
If you have a Commissioner General, and under his watch, we seem to have been meeting targets which were set, then they are not there. We will automatically say, now that this person has gone, and there are people whom they work with, they have gone. Yes, it is. I'm talking optics. It may have nothing, whatever you're dealing with may have nothing to do with that, but the optics, unfortunately, come into play in that discussion.
You know, the beef I have is, and even in the previous administration, is when the government does not tell the truth. You kept saying this over and over, and Du joined you and said, please just tell us the truth. Just speak the truth.
And then we know what to do from there.
We are in end of April. This financial year has 2 months to go.
Yep.
Okay? In March, just like we were being told here by Jimmy the other day, yesterday, and we were told by Churchill on Wednesday, how much had been reported as having been collected by KRA by the end of March was 1.5 trillion shillings.
That's what we're told.
That's what KRA says.
Yes.
If you check the Exchequer, the central bank, the Exchequer report is 1.3 trillion shillings has been collected. Remember, please, the target for this year is 2.4 trillion shillings. By March, they've collected 1.3 trillion shillings with 3 months to the end of the year.
So in these 3 months, are we thinking they're going to collect another trillion?
How?
How is it going to happen?
Where from?
They're only
where?
at 58% of the revenue projection, the basis of which formed a budget of 3.2 trillion shillings. Okay?
Yes.
They have not been able to. So if they cannot really collect $1 trillion in 3 months' time, how can this government say, you know what, because the revenue projection for this year was 2.4 trillion shillings, now in fact we are going to do this, we are going to increase the revenue projection for next year to 2.8 trillion shillings, and on that basis we are going to spend 3.6 trillion. What madness is this?
It's called magic thinking, brother. That's what it's called, magic thinking.
I almost hear them saying, and this is the thing, that sure, we know that we've not collected as much as we ought to. Remember, before that, 2 years ago, at around this very same time, the World Bank came in, and this is under the previous administration, say whatever you like, but the World Bank came in to do what? To give Kenya, very basically, to give Kenya money. And what did that do? It allowed the country to make up for its budget. There was no money to complete what had been allocated in the budget because there was no money to do so. World Bank came in, stepped up, met budget requirements. Okay, now here we are, and we're saying that the economy in this quarter, right, is doing well, and these are the indicators: food, communication, etc. Service industry is robust, and because of that, this is what they've said. Because of that, we can see it going well, in spite of the fact that the collection agency will not collect what it's supposed to. So they're saying, yes, we can see that this 1 trillion, we're not going to get it in the next 3 months, but look at what's happening in the economy. It will actually help us be able to meet up.
And yet the meeting up requires money.
Thank you very much. And that's the problem, that we can say all these nice and rosy things, but the truth of the matter is that you're not talking to people who are blind. You're not talking to a country of individuals who are bereft of their senses. They know exactly what is going on. We can see. So it's nice to have all the policy documents and all the hoity-toity folks in their grey suits and talk about these things. But the truth of the matter is that things are not good.
Yeah.
That's the truth. So why is it that governments want to continue telling people, it's like the folks who are sitting on the Titanic playing music and the thing is sinking? Why do you want to do that? To keep people mesmerized by this feeling that everything is okay when the ship is sinking?
They're basically coming to us and saying, oh, we'll be arriving in New York in give or take another 3-4 days.
You're going down. Why do you do that?
Bloody vessel is not moving.
It's moving, my friend, but it's going down.
Folks,
be all right.
According to our projection, New York will be there.
Meanwhile, you're nowhere. Hey.
And here they are now. I looked at this cabinet dispatch yesterday and I was like, wait a minute. 28 people sat around a table.
That's what I'm saying. Those in their suits.
And they said, this is what we're going to do.
We're going to tell Kenyans. No. Not what we're going to do, Eric. You see the way we're saying things are not.
They're going to do it, and then they're also going to tell. And this is how they're going to sell it to Kenyans.
This is how we're going to couch it to the Kenyans. We know what's going on, but guys, and this is what I'm saying. Whoever faltered by saying the real situation as it is, and then saying, folks, this is the hole, this is how deep it is, and this is how we're going to dig ourselves out of it. But you know what's going on now? This is the hole. Now, while we're in this hole, how about we get a tattered couch? You sit in this hole here, you prepare a meal, we're in this hole, and let's just keep digging deeper.
Madness. Now, yesterday the cabinet met, and the briefing that came from the cabinet to the public was, they sat to discuss the next financial year. This is a very important budget for them because it's the first Kenya Kwanza hustler budget. And so it was important that they sit down and say, this is where we start laying the foundations and the building blocks for the hustler administration and realization of all the promises that we made to the people of Kenya. The statutory timelines are set out in the law. They observed that and they discussed now the bill that's going to be taken to Parliament. This is how they're going to finance their budget. They looked at the projections and they project that the economy is actually going to grow by 6.1% in this year.
Yep.
This calendar year. They also talk about looking back at what happened in the last financial year. Remember, this financial year that ends in June, the budget for this year was 3.2 trillion shillings, is what was passed by Parliament last year. In the 3.2 trillion shillings, the sources of financing that 3.2 trillion shillings expenditure were two. One, tax revenues. And the projection was that in this financial year, we are going to raise 2.4 trillion shillings from taxes. And then the deficit, which is 3.2 minus 2.4, which is how much? It is 800 billion shillings, is going to come from borrowing domestically and internationally, both from the commercial markets and from bilateral and multilateral lenders. Sawa sawa? Sawa sawa. So they looked at that and said, now, because we are growing anyway, now let's look at our GDP. What we want to do is we want to spend the next financial year, in the next financial year, we want to spend about 22.1% of our GDP. So we'll create a budget of 3.6 trillion shillings, an increase of 400 billion from the last financial year. How do we justify this? It's because we can actually even raise more revenues in the next financial year. How much do we want to raise? 2.8 trillion shillings. This year, the budget, the target was 2.4 trillion.
And the indicators
So the
that allow us
400
to
billion
do that.
shillings extra that we're talking about spending in the next financial year, we can collect from taxes.
And how can we collect from taxes is because we see that the activities in the economy are robust.
We're going to grow by 6.1%.
So that's why we can justify a budget like this.
And we're looking at the revenue collection so far, and we're seeing we're doing well, okay? We are supposed to have collected 2.4 trillion shillings by the end of June.
We've collected.
As of 30th of March, they have collected 1.3 trillion shillings.
And we will just need another 3 months to collect another 1.1 trillion. Okay.
Yeah. It has taken us 3 quarters to collect 1.3 trillion. It's going to take us 1
3
quarter.
months to collect 1.1. Don't worry. Everything is going to be all right.
We're fine.
Wongo. Now, somebody's asked me, what benefit would it be for the government to tell the people of Kenya the truth? So now you're asking for the truth. What are you going to do with it?
How will it help you?
How will it help you if you know that actually things are very, very bad? How is it going to help you out of a situation? How will it help? If they tell you, okay, guys, here we are in the kitchen, and unfortunately, what is coming out of the kitchen is not what you expect. This is actually what we're able to cook and deliver to you. What are we talking about? Governance. What are we talking about? Who are you governing? The people of the country are here telling them that this is actually... And then when things get bad, how are you going to be able to explain yourself? People are all in this thing together. Tell them what's happening. In as much as you can say it's robust, it's to say the indicators are showing us that it's going to be a little bit more difficult. Then that's how you start that pull up your socks, tighten your belt narrative. Do it. Would you rather let people know what's happening now, or somewhere down the line, in the next, not too far, in the next 6 to 9 months, when things get blisteringly bad, is now when you say, actually, you know what? We're not going to be able to do this.
The truth doesn't work. It's basically saying you're taking your family to a place. Let's say you're paying rent, and the rent that you're paying currently is 100,000 shillings. Okay, from wherever you live, 100,000 shillings is the rent plus all these other things, or school fees. I don't know, those small things. You have a cologne here, small other things. All right, but 100 is for your rent. At work, you take a pay cut. Sawa, take a pay cut at work. You come home and tell people, I found a nice home, beautiful house, nice blah, 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 loans, blah, 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 nice neighborhood. It's only going for 120. Let's move. Yeah. You've taken a pay cut. You're coming and telling your family, we are moving from this 100K home to a 120K home per month.
Things are looking better. We're going to do better.
And in fact, today I had a meeting with my boss. My boss was telling me, that we are actually going to do very well. In fact, he's already positioning me so that, because the other guy is leaving, I'm going to get a promotion, and I'm the one who will take up that job. So because, there's a likelihood that, it's going to take a promotion, blah, 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 because to fill up that position. Okay? You and the boss and everybody knows that person's position is about to be declared redundant. So you're not going to fill a position that's been declared redundant. But you go to your family and tell them, we are moving.
In fact, we're living a good life.
In fact, we moved to that place for 120. Then we moved the school to this one. The school fees goes up by this much. I mean...
You've got it.
Good life.
You've got it. Because we are going to reduce... we're going to improve on things. In fact, what we're going to do so that we can afford that house, we will reduce certain costs. There are certain things like, the schools that you children go to. There are schools nearby where we are going to, which same quality but cost less. Really, yes, better, cost less. And you go there and you find there's a 20,000 shillings increase in the fees.
But we're okay.
But we're fine because we're reducing cost. But we're paying 20,000 shillings
But I'm
more.
getting a promotion.
Yes.
I'm getting
And,
a promotion.
Yes. So if you study economics, just without too many flowers and too many details, and you don't get mathematical about it. Economics and the study of it revolves around a concept called scarcity, and how it is people who understand economics try to utilize these scarce resources to ensure that life for human beings in their space moves along reasonably well. And you talk about land, these are factors of production. You are talking about natural resources, you're talking about labor, you're talking about capital. Now, if you itemize these things and look at them, let's start with land. I like land. Are we optimally using the land we have in this country for purposes of production? Just a simple question. Are we utilizing it? Yes. Just take your mind there and ask yourself, we have land. Are we? Because it's a factor of production. We have something called human resource. We recently have a situation with the JSS and the health sector where we have more health providers trained, ready in the country than we have places for them. Same with the teachers. That is labor. We're calling it human resource. Are we optimally using the human resource that we have in the best way possible? Because they are part of the factors of production. You're talking about natural resources. We know we have oil. We hear of aquifers where there's water. We hear all these things. And they're in regions which we are told are arid or semi-arid. And then you're told, no, they're saline. And yet we know that there are desalination plants that actually use solar power. And those regions have more solar power than they know what to do with, meaning the natural solar power. So you keep asking, are we utilizing the resources that we have in the best possible way? Then you look at capital. Now, this one is tricky because capital doesn't necessarily have to mean money, but it is a factor of production. And without it, all the things we're talking about becomes a little tricky to move around. Are we moving it around in the best way possible? If we're reading in the papers that monies that are intended for certain things called dams. Now, dams are useful for something called irrigation. Irrigation is very useful for something called food production. If that money is then diverted to places where it shouldn't have been in the first place, for it to get into the budget, it means you proved your case and it was seen as viable. That is why money was allocated for it. That's how it works. If these are the stories we keep hearing, and we have these factors of production, which must be working in tandem to make the economy grow, and you find gaps, and you keep finding gaps. Now, when you throw in factors outside our control, like the exchange of the shilling to the dollar, which does a complete yo-yo and can throw things into a complete turnspill, and then you have COVID. But these are the realities that you must deal with. Then we have to ask the question, when you have a government that is running the country, which realities are they looking at when they're running the government? Because we live in the same country and we can see these realities. And we are hoping that they are the ones who will be able to manage these realities for us. And that's why when they tell us they have a wage bill, we sort of like say, okay, these are the people you brought in to help manage these things. Now, how then do you tell us that everything is going to improve when everything we see around us is telling us the complete opposite? So what are we supposed to believe? An improvement means the situation I'm in gets better. Okay? People talk about the cost of food being lower. Forget the story of affordable. Forget this affordable story. Lower to the point where it can be afforded. Don't tell him it is 150. Who can afford the 150? If it can't be afforded, then it's not affordable.
It's not affordable.
Yes. Now, when these are the stories that represent our reality, even if there's economic growth, you have to ask, okay, so what really is this economic growth? Who is it for? Because economic growth is supposed to be a concept that is appreciated and felt by everybody who lives in the country.
Yeah, you're not going to say that it has grown, and then this growth that you keep it for yourself and hide it under a bushel. No,
You actually can't hide economic growth.
You can't hide
Okay.
that kind of growth.
Is
Everybody's going to feel it. It's just like you say, if your staple then has become cheaper, that means everybody then will be able to afford it. That if you did an audit of everybody's home, whereby they are buying, that you would find it, that they have been able to buy it. If they cannot buy it, it cannot be afforded. And that's what we're talking about. The economy cannot grow and then only a few people see it. No, everybody will see it. The indicators that you speak of will then be available for sight for everybody.
No, when you're told people are eating 1 meal a day as opposed to the 2 or 3 that they used to eat,
those are the indicators.
They're buying less.
Yeah.
So if they're buying less, what do you think happens to those who produce these things which are being bought less of? Everything around what we know and see in the economy does not point to a growth, unfortunately. When capital is available, it spurs what we call economic activity. When it grows, it means a larger number of people have money available to them because of this growth.
CT, why do you reckon
Yes.
that governments, in some cases, want to be so blasé with the truth, or don't want to share what the real situation is? Because as I see governments who do, they seem to behave a little bit better or perform a little bit better.
You do not. Do you
Just
really,
a little bit.
Do you really know how profound your question is? It's very profound, and I'm saying it's profound because you ask me the questions, I will answer. There's something called a competing interest. When people say one thing and do something else, the something else is what they really want to do. This other thing they're saying is for you to just consume and feel it is okay, but they're doing something completely different. And that competing interest is then what manifested itself into the quagmire that we currently find ourselves in the country. That other thing, which they don't talk about. When people do what they say, you see change because they're actually doing what they've said.
Yep.
If they are saying things and they're not doing it, again, you don't see anything happening because they're not doing what they said they're going to do. It's really not that complicated. These governments that you speak of, they understand the concept of accountability. That's why you'll find someone stepping down because they've understood this is my job, and if I'm not doing it,
I need not be there.
no, I need not be there.
Yeah.
I understand my responsibility, and if I can't if I can't live up to it, then somebody else ought to do that job. When you have a people like the people of Kenya who are long-suffering, who are patient, and who are willing to give you a second and third and fourth chance, it appears that our political leaders then think they're ruling stupid people. People who can't think, people who can't see, people who can't understand. So they think that the only thing they can do is to continuously lie to you and that you will believe that their lies are the truth. Now, this is the thing. It's unfortunate. A wonderful people who will keep giving you chances.
Right.
And instead of ensuring that you also provide for them the things that they entrusted you to do for them, all you do is you continuously lie to them. Because if the truth was being told, then all these wars all these problems we keep hearing about, we'd be telling stories of how they're reducing, but we're talking about how they're increasing. So even if you're looking for the truth, where do you think the truth is? In the words or in the reality that you're facing?
Right.
The truth is in the reality that you're living.
And you coach it in a lie and you coach it in hope.
Yes.
And especially that thing of selling hope.
That it will get better.
And you can clearly see, if you can clearly see that you don't have what you are saying that you'd be able to have by now, and you're saying you're going to even get more tomorrow. You cannot see where you're going to get the more tomorrow, but today you know you don't have what you ought to have had today, but you're selling the hope that tomorrow
Yes.
we will get infinitely more. What's the difference between that kind of person or that kind of institution to Pastor Mackenzie?
The cult, it's not selling hope.
You're talking about differences. Can we start with what are the similarities?
Selling hope,
Yes.
false hope.
And the outcome.
Knowing full well what you're telling people is basically, it's the way you keep saying, City, come for your miracle tomorrow at 11
Surely.
and send a deposit in advance.
Yes. Now, so when I don't get my miracle, do I get a refund?
You know very well there's no miracle you're going to perform.
Yes.
Right? And you're telling someone, come tomorrow, we are going to be here for 3 days. Blah, blah, blah. That's exactly what you see from a government that tells you that we are going to get better at revenue collection. That in 4 years' time, our revenue collection is actually going to be 4 trillion shillings.
You know that revenue collection?
4 trillion shillings.
In
When
4
you
years.
still have 3 months, you've not been able to collect 1.1.
Basically,
Right,
what they're
see.
saying is that in 2027, the budget we'll be presenting to Parliament will be a 7 trillion shilling budget.
Yeah.
Okay?
And because
Let's get 3.6
indicators
million
are- and because indicators are robust, all you people who are eating and making food, all you people who are talking on the phone communications, all you people doing retail industry service, you people are the ones who are going to make sure that the government can now spend this 7 trillion.
You know where we get money from?
Same things we're seeing today.
Through our taxes. And for the tax collection or the end product of that collection to be higher, there needs to be an increased economic activity
Exactly.
that produces it.
Where
It's
is the
not-
plan for increased industry? Where is the plan for manufacturing? Where are these indicators that can only fuel that kind of data and information? Where are they?
You
are
know-
there plans for those things to come out?
And you can see the biggest expenditure in the budget is a recurrent.
Recurrent.
And the biggest expenditure in the recurrent budget is what? Debt
Salary.
repayment.
Yes.
Payment, sorry, I was
Okay.
going to say salary.
Followed by
Debt-
no, yeah,
So when you see a president and his administration saying that our tax revenues we are projecting we are going to be raising 4 trillion shillings in 2027 and we are on course, he's basically saying I can start borrowing now. The repayments will be due by 2027, 2028. We'll have a 7 trillion shilling budget. We'll be able to, because our revenues, 4 trillion, will be able to cover the debt repayment.
will it really?
It's basically saying, I want to borrow today because in 3 years' time, I'll be able to pay. When the payments are due, I'll be able. This is a couched way of saying, I am going to start incurring debt.
Long
The
con.
whole story here of, we are not going to borrow like those other guys. We are not going to... Absolute BS. 4 trillion shilling projected revenue in 4 years' time is what are we going to do with the 4 trillion shillings? We are not going to do a 60-40 inverted pyramid in 60% of that 4 trillion shillings that we collect is going to development and only 40 trillion shillings will go into... No. We are going to maintain 60-40, 60%, no, 70-30. 70% of this will be going towards recurrent expenditure, a majority of which will be debt. 30% will be going towards development. So I'm going to borrow.
And
that's what he has
Yes,
said.
and recurrent expenditure, unfortunately, doesn't spur development.
It doesn't.
Yes, and development is what spurs the sort of economy that revenue can be derived from. So, will we ever get out of this situation? Does it seem likely?
Nope.
It does not seem likely.
All indicators are this is where we are headed. And our people who have been elected by the people across the constituencies, 290 of them, plus others who've been elected again in the counties, 47 of them, plus others who've been nominated, 12 of them. All 350 are in parliament and they'll sit there and say,
yeah,
stamp their feet and
we
pass that
agree,
budget.
and they have passed it. They've passed it.
Twende weekend, Mazi.